I was 16 when my parents kicked me out. The reason? I told them I didn't believe in God. That's it. No drugs. No crime. No secret life. Just one honest sentence after dinner. I remember the way the mashed potatoes had started to crust around the edges of my plate while Dad talked about Clearview Baptist College. I'd stopped eating halfway through his monologue. My appetite dried up once he started in on God's divine plan for your life, Carter. That night felt heavy before I even opened my mouth. The air in the dining room was thick. You know when you can feel a moment's gonna explode? Like static right before lightning hits? I'm not going to Clearview, I said, not looking up from my plate. The scrape of silverware stopped. I could hear the tick of the kitchen clock. We'd had that ugly thing since I was a kid. Red hands. No numbers. Just ticks. Excuse me, my dad said, low and calm. That voice that always meant danger. I'm not going, I said again. And I don't think I believe in God. I haven't for a while. Mom gasped. Like, actual gasp, hand to her chest, lips parted. Like she just witnessed a murder. I looked up and said, quietly, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to say it. Dad stood, not slamming his chair or yelling, just rising like a storm cloud building shape. His face went pale. Controlled rage, that was always his thing. Never yelled unless it was for the pulpit. You don't talk like that in this house, he said. I wanted to stay calm, but my voice cracked. It's still the truth. And that was that. They didn't scream, didn't threaten. They just stopped treating me like a person. I still remember the weirdest thing. My mom picked up my water glass, took a sip, and set it down like we were just going to continue dinner, except I was already gone. That night, my dad handed me my old school backpack, stuffed with 2 shirts, some socks, and my high school Bible, the one with my name embossed on the cover. I hadn't opened it in months. Go figure out what you believe, he said. But you won't do it under our roof. The air outside was freezing. October in Montana hits hard, especially at night. My breath came out in clouds. I remember staring at the porch light, the one that always buzzed a little, and thinking, they really did it. They actually did it. I spent the night in Jonah's garage. His parents didn't want me in the house, said they couldn't get involved in family matters. I wrapped myself in a tarp and some old sleeping bags and stared at the rafters until morning. I don't remember sleeping. Just drifting. There's this thing no one tells you about getting kicked out. The worst part isn't the cold, or the hunger, or the fear. It's the silence. The total, hollow silence where your family used to be. For weeks, I bounced around. Jonah's aunt. A guy I barely knew from debate team. A community center. A youth shelter. I stopped keeping track. Eventually, I landed at a crisis shelter in Helena. 6 bunks to a room. Fluorescent lights that buzzed all night. Volunteers who looked at you like you were always about 5 minutes away from ruining their shift. That's where I met Seth. He was older, mid-30s, wore the same black hoodie almost every day. The kind of guy who didn't ask too many questions, which made me trust him more. He handed me a chipped mug of instant coffee one night and said, "You write." I shrugged. Sometimes. You ever get paid to write about things you don't care about? I blinked. I mean, no. He grinned. Welcome to freelancing. He gave me his old laptop, covered in stickers, missing the R key, and showed me how to write copy for random websites. I started with articles about pool maintenance and essential oils. They were trash, but they paid. I made $26 my first week. I stared at the PayPal notification for a solid minute before I started crying. Not loud sobbing, just this weird, silent leak from my eyes that wouldn't stop. That money wasn't much, but it was mine. That was the first time in weeks I felt something close to dignity. I kept that laptop with me everywhere. Slept with it in my sleeping bag. Wiped it down with old t-shirts. I even named it Lucky. Looking back, maybe that was my symbol. Not the Bible they gave me. Not a photo or some grand token of meaning. Just that stupid, half-broken laptop, the first thing that gave me a real voice. One night, I was sitting in the common room typing up a review for a fake health supplement when a girl walked in. She had wild brown curls pulled into a messy bun and this look, like she didn't give a single shit what anyone thought. She dropped her backpack on the couch and said, "You're in my spot." I looked up. Didn't see your name on it. She grinned. Smartass. I like it. Her name was Lacey. She was 17. Ran away from Idaho after her parents tried to send her to some pray the sad away wilderness camp. I didn't even say I was gay, she told me. Just said I felt weird in my body sometimes and maybe therapy would help. Boom. Demon possessed. We started talking. A lot. Volunteering together. walking back to the shelter in silence some nights, sharing snacks, then stories, then blankets. I think I fell in love with her the first time she threw a pack of instant noodles at me and said, "You cook these like a war criminal." She smelled like lavender and peppermint gum, had a habit of bouncing her knee when she was thinking, collected bottle caps for no reason, said they grounded her. I never asked what that meant. We weren't a couple in the traditional sense. We just became us. It wasn't romantic at first. It was survival. Then it was comfort. Then it was something real, something I didn't want to lose. And of course, that's when my dad called. The call came on a Tuesday. I was at the library downtown, using the free Wi-Fi, hunched over Lucky, my busted old laptop. I was working on some mind-numbing ad copy for a teeth whitening kit that promised to brighten your smile and your future. My phone buzzed. No name. Just a number with a 406 area code, Montana. My stomach dropped. I let it ring. Thought maybe it was a scammer. Or someone from my old school. Or my dad. It rang out. Then it buzzed again. Same number. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Carter. His voice hit me like a slap I didn't see coming. It had been nearly a year. I didn't say anything. Just froze, like my whole body decided to play dead. "It's your mom. She's sick." Still nothing from me. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe right. "She has cancer. Stage 2, maybe 3. We're still figuring things out. She wants to see you." I heard his breathing. Slow. Calculated. I finally found my voice. "Barely. You waited a year to call me. And now it's convenient because she's dying." His voice cracked. Just a little. "I should have called sooner." "Yeah," I said. "You should have." I didn't say goodbye. I just hung up. I sat there in the library with my hands shaking and my chest tight like I couldn't take a full breath. People around me kept typing, whispering, scrolling through TikToks. No one noticed the kid in the corner whose world had just cracked sideways. I walked all the way back to the shelter without remembering how I got there. Lacey was sitting cross-legged on the bottom bunk, snacking on dry cereal from the box. "You okay?" she asked, eyes narrowing when she saw my face. I sat on the floor and told her. "Everything." She listened without interrupting, just nodded slowly, eyes unreadable. When I was done, I waited. She didn't say much, just leaned over and said, "You gonna go?" "I don't know." "Do you want to go?" "I don't even know that." We sat in silence. She poured a handful of cereal into my palm. Later that night, when everyone else was asleep, she whispered, "If it was me, I'd go, even just to see for myself. Not for them. For me." I knew she was right, but that didn't make it easier. I bought the bus ticket the next morning. One way. No plan. Just a backpack, Lucky, and that old black hoodie Seth gave me when I first got to Helena, the one with the faded, refused to sink patch sewn onto the sleeve. The Greyhound ride to Billings was long and cold and smelled like feet and sadness. I kept thinking about how it felt the last time I left that town. October air. Porch light buzzing. My mom turning her back. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me hoped she really wasn't sick, that this was just some manipulative stunt to get me back into the fold. Another part of me hated myself for even thinking that. I kept turning that guilt over in my hands, like a stone I couldn't throw away. When I got to the station, he was already there. Same beat-up Honda. Same khaki jacket. Same tense jaw. We didn't hug. Didn't even shake hands. Just got in the car and drove. The house looked exactly the same. Same porch swing, same hummingbird feeder, same Jesus fish bumper sticker on Mom's old Subaru. Inside smelled like cinnamon and Lysol. That mix of cozy and sterile. She was in the bedroom, curled under a quilt I remembered from when I was a kid. Blue and green patches. A few loose threads. She looked smaller, paler, but alive. When our eyes met, she smiled. Not a big one. Just enough. "Hey, baby," she said, her voice raspy. "Hi, Mom." There was a long pause. Too long. Then she started crying. Not sobbing, just tears rolling silently down her cheeks. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered. I sat on the edge of the bed, and for a second, I wasn't sure if I'd cry too or just shut down. I did neither. I took her hand. It was cold. Fragile. "I wasn't sure I would," I said. "But here I am." She nodded. "I'm glad." I don't remember most of what we talked about that day. It was surface level. Doctors. Treatment plans. A show she liked. She asked if I was eating enough. If I was sleeping. That part broke me a little. Because she still cared in all the ways that didn't require belief systems or rules or churches. Just Human stuff. Mom stuff. Later, Dad found me in the kitchen. He was making coffee, same brand he used to grind every Sunday before church. Maxwell House. Too bitter. Always tasted burnt. I want to talk, he said. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You always do. I'm not here to lecture, he said. Just to explain. Explain why you chose your doctrine over your son? I snapped. His shoulders dropped. I was scared, Carter. I scoffed. Of me. Of losing you. Of losing everything I thought I knew. And I did. I lost you. And the church. And my certainty. I looked at him. Really looked. He was older. Not just in years. In the way some people age from the inside out. We left the church, he said. A while ago. It stopped feeling like God was there. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to believe him. But something about the way he said it, the quiet, made it hard not to. He reached into the drawer next to the fridge and handed me something. A pin. A cheap black pin with the Clearview Baptist Church logo on it. You left this when you left. I held it. Turned it in my fingers. Stupid thing. But it felt heavier than it should have. I shoved it in my pocket without thinking. Later, I lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles. I didn't feel better. I didn't feel healed. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like something cracked open. Just enough air to breathe through. I didn't stay long. Just 2 nights. Maybe 40 hours total, if you count the time I spent laying awake on the guest bed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling like they might start bleeding. Before I left, my dad asked if we could talk again. Just a short walk. Around the block. It was cold, but not freezing. The kind of March cold that still bites, but smells faintly like things might grow again someday. We walked mostly in silence. He kept his hands jammed into his jacket pockets, and I kept fiddling with the Clearview pin in mine, the same one he gave me in the kitchen. I hadn't used it. I didn't know why I kept it. Habit, maybe. Or spite. Or something between. You remember Reverend Keeley? He asked eventually. I nodded. Yeah. He left the church last fall. Said he couldn't keep preaching what he didn't believe anymore. That shut me up for a second. Well, I said. Did hell freeze over too? Dad laughed, a short, surprised sound. Maybe. We stopped at the corner. There was a big sycamore tree there. I used to climb it when I was little, before the bark started peeling off like dead skin. I've been working on something, he said, looking straight ahead. A project. It's called the Open Table. It's not a church. It's a space for young people. All backgrounds. Believers, non-believers. Just a place to gather. Talk. Question. I didn't answer. He looked at me then. Really looked. I want you to help. That made me laugh. Like, actual laugh. Too loud. Bitter. You want me to help you launch a youth space? After everything? It's not about me, he said. It's about them. The ones like you, like how you were. How you still are. I shook my head. That's rich. You don't have to decide now, he said. But I meant what I said. I wanted to be led by people who've lived it. Not just preached at it. When I left for Boise the next morning, he handed me a flyer for the Open Table launch night. Blue paper. Bold text. A badly cropped stock photo of a circle of teens smiling way too much. I crumpled it into my bag and told him not to call me for a while. Lacey was waiting for me on the curb when the bus pulled in. She had 2 coffees in hand and this tight, unreadable expression, like she didn't want to ask but also couldn't help herself. I hugged her and mumbled, I'm okay. She didn't believe me. She held the hug a few seconds longer than usual. That night, we sat on the floor of the common room and ate cold pizza out of a box someone had abandoned on the counter. The TV was playing some cooking show, but neither of us were watching. He wants me to help him, I said, finally, with this new project. For youth. He says it's not religious. Lacey picked a pepperoni off her slice. Do you think it's real? Or just rebranded conversion therapy? I don't know, I said. It didn't feel like a trap. She chewed for a second, then shrugged. Even if it is, well, what'd it mean if it's not? I looked at her. What? If he's actually trying? If people like that can change? What does that mean for the rest of us? I didn't have an answer. 2 weeks passed. I didn't go to the launch. But I thought about it. Every day. Then one afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. Hey Carter, it's Sam. I'm running Open Table with your dad. He said I could reach out. No pressure. Just thought you might want to stop by. We're not preachy. Promise. I stared at the message for 20 minutes. Then I ignored it. 3 days later, I texted back. Maybe. What time? Friday night. 6 p.m. I showed up late, Stood across the street for 5 full minutes before walking in. The building looked almost unrecognizable. No pews. No stained glass. No pulpit. Just folding chairs. Pillows. String lights. Chalkboard walls covered in messy, colorful words. Why am I here? Faith is not equal to certainty. It's okay to not be okay. Someone handed me a cup of cocoa. There was lo-fi playing from a cheap Bluetooth speaker in the corner. And no one, not one person, looked at me like I didn't belong. Sam was real. 20-something. Buzzed hair, nose ring, hoodie. She opened the group by saying, "We're not here to fix anyone. Just to witness each other." That line stuck with me. I stayed the whole night. Afterward, I helped stack chairs. Just out of habit. Sam came over, offered a thanks, and said, "Your dad wasn't lying. You've got presence." I almost laughed. "I've got trauma." "Same difference," she said with a wink. Back home, Lacey was curled up in bed with her laptop, watching some true crime doc with the subtitles on. "You went?" she asked without looking. "Yeah." "Was it a cult?" "Not yet," I said, kicking off my shoes. She shut the laptop and sat up. "Do you think you'll go back?" I lay down next to her. Thought for a second. "Maybe." She rested her head on my chest and said nothing. And then, out of nowhere, she whispered, "I've been thinking about leaving." I turned my head to look at her. "Leaving what?" "Boise. Harbor House. This chapter." A beat of silence. I didn't say anything. Just held my breath and waited for her to finish. "I feel like I need to move. I don't know where. I just know I'm getting too comfortable. That scares me more than being lost ever did." I nodded. "I get it." She sat up. "Do you?" "Yeah, I do." And I did. But it still hurt like hell. She left in the middle of the week. Wednesday morning. No big scene. No long talk. No dramatic kiss at the station. Just a quick goodbye in the kitchen. She zipped her red duffel bag, the one with the peeling band stickers, slung it over her shoulder, and grabbed the paper coffee cup I'd left out for her. "You sure you don't want to tell me where you're going?" I asked, trying to make my voice sound light, casual. She shrugged. "Nope." "Will you text me when you land, at least?" "Maybe." Then she smiled. "Don't be so clingy, Whitaker." I laughed, but it didn't reach my eyes. I wanted to say something else. Something that would make her stay. Or come back. Or remember me better. But I just said, "Okay." She hugged me. Fast, tight, then gone. The kind of hug people give when they know if they stay 1 second longer, they'll cry. And then she walked out the door. Hair still damp from the shower. Shoelaces untied. I stood there for a while, staring at the mug she left behind on the counter. Purple, chipped handle, faded graphic that read, "Hot mess in progress." Felt about right. That night, I went back to Open Table. I didn't plan to. I just couldn't be in that empty room. Not with her scent still clinging to the blankets and the bottle caps she'd lined up on the windowsill like tiny trophies. So I went. I sat in the back, hoodie up, arms crossed like armor. This time, the group was talking about forgiveness. Not the tidy kind. The ugly kind. The, "I hate you, but I miss you" kind. The, "I forgive you but don't want to see you again" kind. Sam said something that hit me sideways. Forgiveness isn't a door. It's a hallway. Sometimes it takes years to walk through. And sometimes, you stop halfway and build a life there. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. After the meeting, I helped clean up again. Sam handed me a marker and asked if I wanted to add something to the chalk wall. I wrote, "Forgiveness is weird as hell. CW." That night, my dad texted, "Hey, I wanted you to know, we applied for a grant to keep Open Table going long-term. You helped make that happen. Whether you stay involved or not, thank you." I didn't answer. I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. But instead of replying, I pulled Lucky onto my lap and opened an old folder labeled 2017 school stuff. Inside was a Word doc titled My Family Values, 10th grade essay. I double-clicked. It was bad. Like, really bad. Full of phrases like, "Faith is the cornerstone of our identity, and obedience to God is obedience to family." I didn't even remember writing it. Probably copied half of it from something Dad said in a sermon. I should have deleted it. I wanted to. Instead, I read it, line by line, like picking at an old scab until it bleeds again. And then I saved it under a new name. Things I thought were true. The next few days, I worked more shifts, kept my head down, tried not to notice how quiet the apartment felt without Lacey's foot tapping, her sarcastic commentary, her bottle caps. Then it happened. I was walking out of Open Table after a long session. It was raining, the kind of soft drizzle that feels like static on your skin, when Sam jogged up behind me. "Hey," she said, breathless. "Your dad said you don't know." I turned. "Don't know what?" She hesitated, shifted her weight. Looked like she was trying to decide whether to tell me. Then, the funding. For Open Table. The church didn't pay for it. Okay. Your dad did. Personally. Quietly. Through a foundation he set up after he stepped down. I blinked. What? He didn't want anyone to know. Said it would get in the way. Said he didn't want it to be a space. He just wanted it to exist. My hands went cold. He never told me that. I thought you knew, Sam said gently. I nodded, but my stomach was in knots. Later that night, I called him. He answered on the second ring, like he was waiting. "Hey," he said. "You lied," I said. Silence. "You said this was about them. About the kids. About starting over. And all this time, it's been your money. Your name on the foundation. You used your guilt to fund your own redemption story." He sighed. "Carter." "No," I cut in. "You don't get to Carter me." "You're right," he said. "I should have told you. Why didn't you?" He paused. I could picture him, hand on his forehead, eyes closed, leaning on the kitchen counter like always. "Because I thought if you knew it was me, you'd never walk through the door. And I needed you to walk through that door." There it was. Honesty. The kind that burns. "You manipulated me. I tried to give you space to heal." "No," I said. "You gave yourself space to feel better about abandoning me." The silence stretched. It felt like a void. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that's not enough. But I am." And then the final knife. "Was Mom really sick?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Yes. But not like I said. It was stage 1. Early. Treatable." His voice broke. I panicked. "I thought if I told you she was dying, maybe you'd come. And then maybe you'd stay." I couldn't breathe. My ears buzzed. My face felt hot. I hung up. No words. Just ended the call. Then I threw my phone across the room, hard enough that it cracked against the wall and landed behind the radiator. I sat on the floor and stared at nothing for a long time. Then I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the Clearview pen, snapped it in half. I didn't go to Open Table for a while after that. Didn't return Sam's texts. Didn't pick up when my dad called again. Didn't even tell Ryan what happened, and he's nosy enough to ask when I blink weird. I was just done. For days, I wandered the city with no real direction. Sat in empty parks with my head up. Scrolled aimlessly on my cracked phone. Wrote angry notes in the margins of library books I knew no one would ever read. I felt stupid for trusting him again. For letting my guard down. For letting hope crawl back in, like some ugly stray I couldn't help feeding. And yeah, I miss Lacey. More than I let myself admit. I'd stare at the empty windowsill where her bottle caps used to be, like if I looked long enough they might show up again. One night, I found myself walking past the Open Table building. I told myself I wasn't going inside. I just wanted to see if the chalkboard wall still had my stupid quote on it. It did. "Forgiveness is weird as hell. CW." Below it, someone had added, "Same, bro." That made me smile, even though I didn't want to. Then I noticed something else. Taped to the bulletin board by the door was a photo. Me, Sam, Maya, a few other kids from the group, all laughing, arms around each other, mid-blink and blurry. Someone had written above it in marker, "This is what healing looks like, even when it's messy." I stood there a long time, staring at that photo. Then I turned around and went home. The next day, I started writing again. Not SEO crap. Not ad copy. Just writing. I opened a blank doc, typed, "I don't believe in God, but I believe in second chances." And that might be harder. And it felt good. Not clean. Not fixed. Just true. Weeks passed. One afternoon, I found an envelope taped to our apartment door. No return address. Just my name, messy handwriting. Inside was a postcard, Portland skyline, and a note. "Found a new city. Found a weird little bookstore. Thinking of applying for a job there. Miss your loud typing and the way you talk to your laptop like it's your child. Keep going. L." There was something else tucked inside. A bottle cap. Silver. Bent slightly at the edge. The kind she would have said had character. I stood there in the hallway, holding it, and for the first time in a while, I let myself cry. Not out of anger. Not from betrayal. Just from missing. From being human. From remembering that healing isn't a destination, it's a daily, stupid choice. I still don't go home much. My dad still texts sometimes. He doesn't push. We've settled into a weird middle place, not trust, not hate. Just cautious contact. A hallway with no doors. Mom's doing okay, last I heard. She sent me a photo of her holding a lemon tree she's trying to grow on their porch. Said it looks sad, but she's proud of it anyway. Same. I still volunteer at open tables sometimes. Not as much. But I go. I sit in the back. Sometimes I talk. Sometimes I don't. Maya leads most weeks now. She's good at it. Gentle but not fake. Says shit like, you don't have to believe in anything to deserve space here, and means it. She asked me once if I forgave my parents. I said, some days. And that was enough. Some days, I still reach for that broken pin before I remember it's gone. Some days, I think about mailing that bottle cap back to Lacey. Some days, I write her letters I'll never send. And some days, not always, but more and more, I feel okay. Not whole, but okay. And for the first time in a long time, that's more than enough.